Two families, same jobs, same paychecks, same 26 items on the grocery list. Milk, eggs, chicken, rice, canned vegetables, bread, the boring stuff that keeps you alive. Family A walks out of the store, $187. Family B, $261. Same list, same day, same country. The only difference is the state they live in, and that $74 gap? That's not a glitch. That's geography. That's infrastructure. That's the invisible hand of a supply chain that treats some zip codes like VIPs and others like afterthoughts. And in 2026, that gap is about to rip wide open because a tidal wave of tariffs, collapsing cattle inventory, and agricultural blind spots are slamming into each other, all at the same time. And depending on where you live, your grocery bill is either going to sting a little or it's going to hemorrhage. Today, we're dissecting the 6 measurable factors that determine how hard food prices hit your state. We scored all 50. We ranked them. We built a tier list. And the bottom 10? They might want to sit down, maybe grab a drink. Actually, check the price of that drink first. The grocery apocalypse. Why 2026 is different. Here's the thing nobody on cable news is telling you. When some suit on TV says food inflation is running at 4%, everyone nods along. Like that number means the same thing in Des Moines as it does in Honolulu. It doesn't. It never has. And in 2026, the difference isn't just noticeable, it's brutal. The United States doesn't have one food economy. It has 50, each shaped by geography, infrastructure, agriculture, trade exposure, and local resilience. And right now, every single one of those variables is under pressure, simultaneously. Like the universe ran a stress test on the American food supply and forgot to tell anyone. The cattle inventory in the United States just hit its lowest point in 75 years. That's not my opinion. That's the USDA and the Food Marketing Institute putting ink on paper. Your grandparents had more cows per capita during the Korean War than you do right now trying to buy ground beef for Taco Tuesday. Coffee, up over 20%. Bananas, one of the cheapest staples in any American kitchen, up 7% and still climbing. And according to Spins, the company that tracks every item scanned at every register in America, the worst of it hasn't even hit yet. Food price increases are projected to peak around mid-2026. So the question isn't whether food is getting more expensive. That ship sailed, hit an iceberg, and is currently being auctioned for parts. The question is, how much more expensive and where? 6 factors, 50 states, one very uncomfortable tier list, and a survival maxim you should probably tattoo somewhere visible. Rule number 1 of the grocery apocalypse. It's not about what you earn. It's about where you spend it. Factor 1. The breadbasket or the begging bowl. Agricultural self-sufficiency ratio. The most fundamental question about any state's food security. How much of what you eat does your state actually grow? Not export, not process for someone else. Grow, harvest, and put on your table. Iowa produces over 500% of the food its population needs. That's not a typo. Iowa could feed itself 5 times over, hand out leftovers to every neighbor, and still have enough surplus to make the rest of the country feel inadequate. Nebraska, Kansas, the Dakotas, same energy. These states don't just feed themselves. They feed the country. They are the country's food supply. Now flip the map. Some states produce almost nothing relative to what their residents consume. We'll get into the specific numbers when we hit the tier list. And believe me, some of those numbers will make you physically uncomfortable. But the principle is dead simple. When supply chains tighten, when diesel spikes, when tariffs hit imports, the states that grow their own food have a buffer, a cushion, a "we'll be fine." The states that don't, they eat whatever price the market decides to charge. And the market in 2026 is not running a charity. But raw production is only half the story, because some states grow a lot, just not the right things. Factor 2. The umbilical cord. Sigrokeen, food import dependency. This cuts at a different angle than self-sufficiency. Some states produce plenty, just not what their residents actually put in their mouths. And some states are geographically positioned to be completely, helplessly dependent on food arriving from somewhere else. Island states sitting thousands of miles from the nearest port. Desert states where the soil grows rocks better than radishes. And here's the one people don't expect. Wealthy northeastern states where the land got too expensive for farming decades ago. Those charming Connecticut estates used to be dairy farms. Now they're hedge fund managers' weekend retreats. Nobody's grazing cattle on a tennis court. They all share the same vulnerability. When 80 or 90% of your food comes from outside your borders, you're not participating in a food economy, you're a hostage of one. And here's where it becomes a multiplier. If your state imports 80% of its food and 20% of that crosses an international border subject to new tariffs, you're not dealing with normal inflation. You're dealing with compounding cost on top of compounding cost. Interest on interest, except instead of a loan, it's your groceries. The specific numbers for the worst offenders? We'll get there. But first, let's talk about the invisible tax hiding between the farm and your fridge. Factor 3. The last mile tax. Distribution distance and logistics cost. Here's something that'll rewire how you think about grocery prices. Every item in your store, every box of cereal, every jar of peanut butter, every sad little bag of pre-washed salad must pass through a distribution center before it reached that shelf. A massive warehouse where trucks unload, inventory gets sorted, and smaller trucks fan out to regional stores. The distance between that warehouse and your local store, combined with what it costs to cover that distance, determines a shockingly large chunk of your grocery bill. And almost nobody thinks about it. Under 100 miles from a major hub. Safe zone. Tight margins, fierce competition, honest pricing. This is the sweet spot, the grocery equivalent of living next to the water treatment plant. Boring but effective. Between 100 and 300 miles. Markups start appearing. Fuel surcharges, smaller, less frequent deliveries, more product spoilage on the store end, which means higher shrinkage, which means, you guessed it, higher prices passed to you. Over 300 miles? Welcome to the pain zone, rural Montana, remote Alaska, the parts of Nevada that are 3 hours from anything resembling a warehouse. A silent tax on every item, every day, that never shows up on your receipt but never leaves your total. And the pain isn't distributed equally because diesel prices aren't uniform. California sits at $5.80 per gallon. Texas? $3.50. A truck driving 300 miles in California costs almost double the same trip in Texas. Same food, same truck, wildly different cost. And guess who absorbs the difference? Not the trucking company, you. The map for this factor looks like a target with a bullseye over the Midwest. The further you get from that center, the more you pay. Central states with interstate connections and cheap fuel, Indiana, Ohio, Missouri, barely feel this cost. States on the edges, the islands, the mountains, every penny hurts. Now, everything I've covered so far is structural, baked into the system for decades. But the next factor, this one is new. This one is 2026 specific. And for some states, it changes everything. Factor 4, the tariff guillotine. Tariff exposure, 2026 edition. This is the factor that turns a slow burn into a 5-alarm fire. Northern border. States along the Canadian line are staring down tariffs on dairy and meat products. Canada is the #1 foreign supplier of beef, pork, and dairy to the northern United States. Vermont, Montana, North Dakota, Minnesota, significant cross-border food trade that just got handed a tax bill nobody budgeted for. Southern border. States that rely on Mexican produce, fruits, vegetables, avocados, tomatoes, peppers, are facing a completely different hit. Arizona, New Mexico, California, Texas, they're the front door for a huge percentage of America's fresh produce. And those tariffs don't just affect border states. They ripple to every state those trucks deliver to. Your grocery store in Ohio is getting hit by a tariff applied in Nogales, Arizona. You just don't see the stamp. But here's the part most analyses miss entirely. It's not just the food. Steel and aluminum tariffs at 50% are inflating the cost of packaging. Cans, aluminum trays, foil wrapping, tin lids. Every processed and packaged food item in America just got more expensive to put on a shelf, regardless of where the food inside was grown. Your canned tomatoes from California? The tomatoes aren't tariffed. The can is. And you're paying for the can whether you think about it or not. That frozen dinner in the aluminum tray? Same story. That protein bar in the foil wrapper? Same story. It's the invisible tariff that touches every aisle in every store in every state. The Yale Budget Lab projects that current tariff policies will generate $194.8 billion in revenue. That's not free money from the tariff fairy. That's cost, real cost. And it flows downhill to importers, to distributors, to grocery chains, and eventually to that little piece of paper at checkout that makes you question your life choices. But the word average in their projections is doing enormous heavy lifting, because the average masks brutal state-level variation. One state's mild inconvenience is another state's budget crisis. The tariff factor is the great unequalizer of 2026. Factor 5, the escape valve, local food, network strength, farmers markets, CSAs, community gardens, direct-to-consumer farm sales, local co-ops, The produce stand on the side of the road run by a guy named Earl who has dirt permanently embedded in his fingerprints and tomatoes that taste like actual tomatoes. This factor is about resilience, the escape hatch. When the national supply chain cracks, when supermarket prices spike, when the system shutters, do the people in your state have somewhere else to turn? When Walmart jacks up the price of eggs, can you buy from the farmer down the road? When supply chains hiccup, does Earl still have tomatoes? It's not the whole solution, but it's the pressure release valve that keeps a bad situation from becoming a catastrophic one. Some states have deep local food cultures, strong co-ops where producers and consumers know each other by name, established CSA networks delivering seasonal boxes to thousands of households. Others have food deserts stretching for miles, where the nearest fresh vegetable is a 40-minute drive and a farmer's market is a Saturday Instagram opportunity, not a supply chain alternative. This factor alone won't save you, but combined with the other 5, it's the cushion between weathering a storm and getting flattened by one. 6 factors, measured, weighted, applied to all 50 states. Now comes the part you've been waiting for. And fair warning, some of you are not going to like this. The tier list, all 50 states ranked, 50 states, 6 factors each, 1 ranking. Quick methodology note, self-sufficiency and import dependency carry the heaviest weight. They're structural and can't be fixed with a good harvest or a policy tweet. Tariff exposure is weighted for 2026 specifically. Logistics and local networks round out the picture. No state is perfect. No state is doomed. But the gap between the top and bottom is wide enough to drive a supply truck through. ES tier, the fortresses. 5 states where structural advantages run so deep the impact gets absorbed like a punch to a heavyweight. Iowa, undisputed champion, over 500% production surplus. Central location on I-80 and I-35, a logistics crossroads that keeps freight costs laughably low. Strong local food culture. If the global supply chain collapsed tomorrow, Iowa would still eat 3 meals a day without breaking a sweat. Iowa is the kid in the disaster movie who somehow has a fully stocked bunker. Nebraska, beef and grain powerhouse, self-contained food economy, central positioning that's basically cheating. Nebraska feeds itself, feeds its neighbors, and sends the leftovers to states that forgot to grow anything. Kansas, the wheat belt anchor. But here's what puts Kansas in S tier. It doesn't just grow wheat, it processes it. Flour mills, bread production, cereal manufacturing. Field to shelf, almost entirely within state lines. That's vertical integration at the state level. Indiana, surprises everyone. Diverse agriculture, but the real superpower is location. Indianapolis is within a day's drive of 65% of the US population. Distribution costs are microscopic. Supplier competition is fierce. Prices stay below national average even when everything else is on fire. Minnesota, strong agriculture, robust co-op networks, Land O'Lakes, CHS, dozens of regional cooperatives linking producers directly to consumers. Minnesota also produces its own dairy, so when Canadian dairy tariffs hit, Minnesota shrugs. When your state makes its own cheese, you don't care what the tariff on Quebec cheddar is. A tier, the solid ground 8, states with genuine structural advantages but 1 or 2 vulnerabilities keeping them out of the top 5. Wisconsin, dairy empire, strong local networks, minor Canadian border exposure. Illinois, central location, massive output, but Chicago's urban density drags the statewide average. Ohio, balanced across all 6 factors, the Swiss Army knife of food security. Missouri, geographic crossroads, strong livestock, quiet overachiever. North Dakota and South Dakota, enormous per capita output, some distribution challenges in remote areas. Arkansas, poultry capital nobody talks about, rice production, costs that punch below their weight. Idaho, dairy industry is massive and growing behind the potato fame. B tier, the middle ground, 12 states. Texas, Georgia, Virginia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Oklahoma, Kentucky, Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, North Carolina, South Carolina. Broadly okay, but carrying real vulnerabilities in at least 2 factors. And yes, Texas. I hear you. Agricultural Texas absolutely deserves higher. But Texas is enormous. West Texas is a distribution desert. The Rio Grande Valley is ground zero for Mexican produce tariffs. When you average the whole state, B tier is where the data puts it. Before you come for me in the comments, show me the numbers that say otherwise. I'll wait. The rest of B tier follows a pattern. Strong production in some areas, vulnerability in others. Poultry states lacking crop diversity. Appalachian states with mountain distribution nightmares. Agricultural states where most production is commodity export. Cotton, soybeans, not food for local plates. C tier, the pressure zone. 10 states where it starts getting uncomfortable. California, #1 agricultural state by revenue. Grows everything. So why C tier? Highest diesel in the continental US. Longest internal distribution distances. Water crisis threatening long-term production. Mexican border tariff exposure. And a baseline cost of living that means food prices start higher before a single tariff is applied. California produces the food, it just can't eat it cheaply. Florida, citrus powerhouse, but one bad hurricane season disrupts everything. Population growth outpacing agricultural capacity. New York, upstate dairy and apples are solid. The 5 boroughs drag the average down like an anchor on a life vest. New Jersey, Maryland, Delaware, small states, limited agriculture, metro premium pricing. Colorado, Oregon, Washington, excellent agriculture in specific valleys, mountains, and distance everywhere else. The Cascades and Rockies aren't scenery, they're distribution walls. Louisiana, seafood and rice provide local resilience, but post-hurricane infrastructure fragility is a cost bomb that can detonate any given year. D tier, the danger zone. 6 areas that have crossed the line from manageable to structurally disadvantaged. Maine, limited diversity, harsh growing season, Canadian border tariff exposure. Montana and Wyoming, massive land, tiny populations, enormous distances. Utah, Salt Lake Metro is fine, everything else is desert and distance. West Virginia, Appalachian geography versus distribution infrastructure. Geography wins. DC, zero production, complete import dependency, most expensive grocery square footage in the country. F tier, the bottom 10. And here we are, the bottom of the map. The states where food prices in 2026 hit hardest, stay longest, and leave the deepest mark on household budgets. These aren't states with a single weakness. These are states where multiple factors converge into a perfect storm of food price vulnerability. Limited production, heavy import dependency, long distribution distances, direct tariff exposure, weak local alternatives. When you stack enough of those together, the math turns ugly fast. We're going through every single one, in detail, with the specific item that'll hurt most in each state. Find yours. Number 10, New Hampshire. The quiet collapse. New Hampshire can grow food. It does grow food, but the scale is catastrophically wrong. Small farms, short growing season, limited arable land, and a southern population boom near Boston's orbit that's adding mouths faster than the system can handle. Distribution depends on hubs in Massachusetts, which has its own problems we'll get to shortly. Canadian border proximity means dairy and meat prices take a direct tariff hit. And the local food network, while passionate, covers a fraction of what's needed. The item that'll hurt most? Dairy. The majority of fluid milk comes from regional processors sourcing from both domestic and Canadian suppliers. When that tariff drops, the per-gallon price in Manchester goes up before anyone else even notices. Number 9, Vermont. The irony state. Vermont does so many things right that it hurts to put it here. Best local food culture per capita in America, arguably. Farm to table isn't a marketing gimmick, it's how a real chunk of Vermonters actually eat. Farmers markets, CSAs, craft cheese operations that would make a European jealous. The problem? That local network serves 20 to 25% of the population's caloric needs. The rest comes from Quebec and Ontario for dairy, regional distributors for processed goods, and a national supply chain for everything else. Canada border tariffs hit Vermont harder than almost any state because the dairy integration is deep, structural, and decades old. Shared processors, shared distribution, shared infrastructure. When that relationship gets taxed, Vermont's consumers absorb the hit. The item that'll hurt most? Cheese, which in Vermont is basically a fundamental human right. Number 8, Massachusetts. The wealth trap. 7 million people. Farmland converted to suburbs, offices, and universities for a century. Massachusetts is one of the wealthiest states in America, and it's used that wealth to do one thing with startling efficiency: buy its food from everyone else. New Bedford is still the highest value fishing port in the continental US, but fish doesn't replace bread, milk, and produce on a Tuesday dinner table. Tariff exposure is two-directional. Canadian imports from the north, international produce through the Port of Boston. Logistics costs among the highest in the Northeast. Congestion, tolls, dock fees stacking on every delivery. The item that'll hurt most? Fresh produce. Nearly all fruits and vegetables arrive from out of state or out of country. That supply chain just got a surcharge, and the surcharge has a surcharge. Number 7. Connecticut, the Fairfield County paradox. Second highest per capita income in America. Also some of the highest food prices. When land is worth $2 million an acre in Fairfield County, nobody's growing tomatoes on it. Connecticut's agricultural footprint has been shrinking for decades. What remains, shade tobacco, nursery plants, small-scale dairy, produces zero staple foods at the scale 3.5 million people need. The state imports overwhelmingly from distribution centers in New Jersey and Pennsylvania and through the Port of New York. Every link in that chain just got more expensive. The item that'll hurt most? Canned goods. Zero in-state processing capacity for preserved foods. Every can arrives from elsewhere, and steel and aluminum tariffs at 50% land directly on the packaging. The tomatoes inside aren't tariffed. The can is, and you're paying for both. Number 6. Rhode Island, the smallest buffer. 1,500 square miles. The King Ranch in Texas is bigger. There is physically not enough land to grow food at scale. Providence, Warwick, and Cranston have other plans for what real estate exists. Rhode Island depends on supply chains from Massachusetts and Connecticut, both of which, as you've just heard, are spiraling. When those chains get stressed, Rhode Island is last served, first squeezed. The item that'll hurt most? Meat. Virtually no livestock production. Every cut of beef, pork, and chicken arrives from out of state, and with cattle inventory at a 75-year low nationally plus Canadian import tariffs, there's no local escape valve. Number 5. Arizona, the desert reckoning. Arizona is in a fight with its own geography, and geography is winning. Phoenix, one of the fastest-growing metros in America, keeps adding demand to a food system never designed for this volume. Every new family that moves to Maricopa County for the sunshine and the tax benefits adds another grocery cart to a supply chain that's already stretched thin. Yuma County produces winter lettuce and vegetables, which sounds great until you realize that output serves the national market, not the local one. Arizona grows food for everyone else's salad, and the water powering that production is drawn from aquifers and river systems draining faster than they recharge. It's like running a restaurant on a credit card that's already maxed out. The Mexican border tariff exposure is direct and devastating. Arizona is one of the primary entry points for Mexican produce: tomatoes, peppers, avocados, berries. When those tariffs land, Arizona doesn't feel a ripple, it feels the wave. And the alternative supply chains, further away, more expensive, already under their own pressure. The item that'll hurt most? Fresh vegetables? Dependency on cross-border produce is absolute for certain categories. When that supply gets taxed, there is no domestic replacement at equivalent volume and cost. The shelf gets more expensive or the shelf gets empty. Those are the options. Number 4. New Mexico, the already lost. If Arizona is in a fight with its geography, New Mexico already lost. Signed the surrender papers. Geography collected the keys. The agricultural sector is cattle ranching and chili peppers, both culturally important, nowhere near sufficient for 2 million people. And distribution is the real killer. Albuquerque has reasonable access to major hubs. Everything outside Albuquerque, which is most of the state by area, is a logistics challenge that borders on the absurd. Las Cruces to Albuquerque is 225 miles. Santa Fe adds its own premium. Rural communities in the west and northeast can be hours from a full-service grocery store, not minutes, hours. And every one of those hours burns fuel, wastes time, and limits how often people can even shop. Tariff exposure hits from both borders simultaneously. Canadian beef imports face new costs from the north. Mexican produce, which feeds the southern half of the state almost exclusively, gets taxed at the crossing from the south. The USDA classifies significant chunks of New Mexico as food deserts, where residents have limited access to affordable, nutritious food. That was bad before 2026. It's accelerating now. The item that'll hurt most? Fruits. Almost zero commercial fruit production in the entire state. Every apple, banana, and orange arrives from California, Mexico, or Washington state, all three of which just got more expensive at the same time. Which, if you're keeping score, is what we in the business call a bad situation. Number 3. Nevada, 3%. Nevada's agricultural self-sufficiency is 3%. 3%. Let that land. 97% of everything eaten in the state was grown, processed, and shipped from somewhere else. Las Vegas, 2.2 million people in the middle of a desert. Reno adds another 500,000. Between them, they consume an enormous volume of food produced almost entirely outside state lines. And here's the part that should terrify anyone with a grocery budget in Clark County. The water situation makes agriculture at scale functionally impossible. The Colorado River, Las Vegas's lifeline, is at historic lows and getting lower. Northern aquifers are tapped for mining operations, not irrigation. There is no realistic path to food self-sufficiency for Nevada. Not now, not in 20 years, not without a technological revolution in water production that doesn't currently exist outside of science fiction. Supply comes primarily from California, which has its own cost crisis, and from Utah and Arizona, which you already know are struggling. Nevada sits at the terminus of multiple supply chains, each simultaneously getting more expensive. It's a game of musical chairs, and Nevada doesn't have a chair, never had one, isn't getting one. The item that'll hurt most? Everything. When you import 97% and every supply chain feeding you is under pressure at the same time, there's no single item that absorbs the hit. The entire basket moves. In Nevada, your grocery bill isn't a line item. It's a barometer for the national supply chain, and that barometer is in free fall. Number 2, Alaska. The isolation premium. 95% import dependency. 3,000 miles from the nearest major agricultural region. A growing season measured in weeks, not months. Distribution that relies on barges, cargo planes, and a single highway through Canada. A highway that now carries tariffed goods at every border crossing. Alaska has always been expensive for food. A gallon of milk in Juneau has cost twice the Des Moines price for decades. That's not news. But in 2026, the multipliers are stacking in ways they haven't before. Canadian transit tariffs hit every truck on the Alaska highway. Barge shipping costs have risen with fuel. Air freight, the lifeline for communities off the road system, prices fresh produce as a luxury good, not a figure of speech. Actual luxury pricing. And here's the reality most Americans can't comprehend. Some remote Alaskan villages, the ones off the road grid, the ones that get supplies by bush plane or seasonal barge, pay $15 for a gallon of milk, $20 for a bag of oranges. These aren't tourist trap markups. These are the actual costs of moving food to places that ice cuts off for months at a time. And those numbers are going up with everything else. The fishing industry is a genuine buffer. Salmon, halibut, crab. Alaska's waters are some of the most productive on the planet. But fishing is seasonal. Processing capacity is limited. And if you're in Fairbanks in February, the ocean might as well be on Mars. The item that'll hurt most? Shelf-stable goods, canned food, dry goods, packaged staples, the backbone of remote Alaska survival. Every one of those items just got more expensive to can, more expensive to ship, and more expensive to store. The can costs more, the truck costs more, the barge costs more. The person at the end of the line pays for all of it. Number 1, Hawaii, the end of the line. You knew it was coming, and it's as bad as you think. Hawaii imports 85% or more of its food, by ship, across 2,500 miles of open Pacific, to an island chain with limited storage, limited cold chain capacity, and 1.4 million permanent residents plus 14 million tourists per year who all need to eat. Let that ratio sink in. For every person who lives in Hawaii, 10 visitors show up annually, and every single one of them is consuming food that was shipped across an ocean at premium cost. There is no truck route to Hawaii, no pipeline, no rail line, no bridge. Every single pound of food arrives by container ship or cargo plane. And both delivery methods are accelerating in cost under fuel pressure, port congestion, and climbing container rates globally. The tariff impact is mostly indirect, which somehow makes it worse. Hawaii doesn't import much directly from Canada or Mexico, but it imports from California, Washington, and the mainland distribution network, all of which are absorbing tariff costs and passing them forward. By the time that cost-inflated food crosses 2,500 miles of ocean, the markup has been multiplied so many times the original tariff is unrecognizable. It's just more expensive. Everything. Always. And there's nobody to complain to because the math doesn't care about your feelings. The cruel paradox: fertile volcanic soil, abundant rainfall on windward coasts, a climate that could grow food year-round. But the land goes to tourism infrastructure, military installations, luxury real estate, and export crops, macadamia nuts, Kona coffee, products that generate revenue but don't feed the local population. Hawaii could theoretically be a food garden. Instead, it's a food desert with a beautiful view. A dozen eggs in Honolulu already costs double the national average. Fresh produce? Add 40 to 60%. And in 2026, with mainland price increases, rising shipping costs, and zero local alternatives compounding simultaneously, those numbers climb further up a hill that was already steep. The item that'll hurt most? Perishables. Anything with a shelf life measured in days, fresh meat, dairy, produce, bread, carries the full burden of the fastest, most expensive shipping options. And Hawaii has no backup plan, no neighboring state to drive to, no second supply chain waiting in reserve. There's the ocean. That's it. Hawaii is the most food price vulnerable state in the Union, and 2026 is about to prove it with receipts. Literally. What you do now. So what do you do with this? If you're an S or A tier, this video is context, awareness. The increases won't crack your budget. File it and keep moving. B or C tier. Start thinking about margins. Where can you shift spending? Where are the local alternatives you've been walking past every Saturday? D or F tier. This is a call to action. Not panic. Calm, deliberate, strategic action. 4 things. Right now. Today. 1. Build a 30-day rotating food reserve. Not a doomsday bunker. A smart buffer. Rice, beans, canned protein, cooking oils were the staples that keep and rotate. Buy at this month's prices, eat next month, refill. When prices spike, you're eating food you already paid for. That's not hoarding. That's household supply chain management. And it works whether you're in Iowa or Hawaii. The math just becomes more urgent the further down the tier list you live. 2. Find your local food network. Farmers markets, CSAs, community gardens, co-ops. Every dollar you spend in a local food system bypasses the tariff-inflated national supply chain entirely. No import markup, no cross-country diesel surcharge, no aluminum tariff on the packaging. In F-tier states, this isn't a lifestyle choice. It's survival economics. And if your state doesn't have a strong network, that's the problem. Be part of building one. 3. Buy seasonal and buy heavy. Produce is cheapest at peak season, even in expensive states. Learn the calendar. Buy volume in summer. Freeze it, can it, dehydrate it. Your future self in January will send your present self in July a thank you note, possibly with tears. 4. Grow something, anything. A tomato plant on a balcony, herbs in a windowsill box, a backyard bed with lettuce, peppers, and squash. It will not replace your grocery bill. That's not the point. The point is shifting your identity from pure consumer to partial producer. And that psychological shift changes how you relate to the entire food system. The states at the top of this list didn't build resilience by accident. They built systems, production, distribution, local networks, cooperative economics. You can build those systems at the household level, and 2026 is a very good reason to start. Closing. That's the map, that's the data, that's where your state stands. And now you know exactly why. If you made it this far, and I know you did because you needed to find your state, drop a comment with your tier. S, A, deep in the red? I want to hear it. The most valuable data we've got is the lived experience behind the numbers. Hit subscribe if you haven't. We do this consistently, and the next one is going to hit different. Because the food prices, that's just the opening act. The rules of money in this country are changing. How you earn it, how it holds value, how you protect what you've built. We've been digging into that data too. What's coming next? You're going to want to see the numbers before the numbers see you. I'll catch you in the next one.